Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth running organization. There always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now, you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here is your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found the information on last week's show, Being a Legally Savvy Business Owner, informative. If you are unable to join us and would like to listen to the show, a link is located on our YouTube and Facebook pages, as well as links for iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. If there are questions you have or any topic suggestions you would like to share, please reach out to us at media@abandp.com. Now let's learn a little bit about our guest today. The CEO and founder of Putnam Financial Group, Cherie is committed to the success of owners and their businesses by supporting the needs of her clients in the areas of accounting, tax, advisory, and wealth management services. Cherie's holistic and collaborative approach results in her ability to help business owners to grow in revenue, increase profitability, achieve asset protection, improve cash flow, secure their wealth through comprehensive financial planning, and securing their future through succession and estate planning, all while minimizing their overall tax burden. Prior to establishing her CPA and wealth management firms, Cherie held positions at both international and local CPA firms. Her positions specialized in accounting, tax, financial planning, and business consulting. A California native, Cherie resides in Redondo Beach with her husband, John, and two sons, Matthew and Brandon. So Cherie, welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning, Candy. Good to see you today, and thank you for having me here.
I'm glad you're back. I know we did an interview with you last year, so those who were following us at that time probably heard that episode, but it was important to come back and have another discussion. Of course, there's been a lot that's happened in the last year, which is why I wanted to invite you back. But before we get into the topic of our discussion today, I would love for you to share, for anyone who maybe hadn't heard that interview, about your background and how you even got into your accounting practice.
Sure, certainly. So I'm a local gal, went to school, born and raised here in Southern California, went to school at USC to obtain my accounting and finance degrees. While in high school, I worked for a family business for a while. I worked for a small CPA firm for a while doing bookkeeping. And then upon graduation from USC, I moved over to one of the big four, who will remain nameless for today. But I'm from a long line of entrepreneurs. My great-grandmother had a candy shop on Venice Beach. My grandparents on both sides had business dealings. In fact, that's where my parents met, was on Venice Beach, as
Nice.
They were working in their relative business owner or family businesses. And so I'm a fourth generation entrepreneur. And after cutting my teeth in small CPA firms and whatnot, it was time to open my own and build that dream of what the principles were that I learned growing up in a family business were all about. And so we've been able to successfully do that within our CPA firm and then moving over to our financial services firm as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great that you had some history to even look back on to help. I mean, there's so many people that don't even have that. I didn't really have a lot of experience. I think I had a grandfather who was an entrepreneur. His business was seasonal, and I didn't get to see very much of that because he lived in another state. But other than that, I had no one else. So that was kind of a benefit for you as well, to really have seen that, to help you kind of know what to expect.
Well, the experience was priceless. And just going back, I mean, this was many years ago. So this was before professions collaborated, or what we see today as the consolidation. And so, learning through their eyes and growing up, and back then you would have meetings at their kitchen dinner table, type of thing with the advisors. And I remember sitting there at a very young age, my brother and I, and with the financial advisor or with the banker or with the attorney, and then all the confusion because even though they gave good advice, they didn't work with each other to make sure it was coordinated
Mhm.
for the good of the family business. And so that's really the impact, was just the integration of services that I saw,
Mhm.
starting to flourish and build my own clientele and my own practice. That's what I gear towards, is this holistic collaborative approach between many disciplines that we can offer right here in our office.
Mhm. Well, and I wanted to start talking about kind of the impact of what has happened even in 2020. We all know we've been experiencing this, crazy, unexpected times with COVID and the pandemic.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I would love for you first to just tell us a little bit about some of the challenges your own company has faced, and then what challenges have your clients also faced that you've been, seeing as they've been coming to you.
Certainly. So, nobody would have figured that this was coming, right? If we were sitting at this time last year when we had our show last year, we would have never predicted this, right?
Right.
So challenges that we've experienced as a service provider, uncertainty and concern for our clients. We
Mhm.
build that relationship with our clients, and so if they're hurting, we're hurting.
Right.
Burdening the emotions and things like that. Information overload, PPP,
Mhm.
the idle loans. And I know that you have experienced much of the same in your business. We've
Right.
shared that throughout the year. The goalposts keep moving.
Mhm.
And then tax season elongated. All of a sudden, we went from an April 15th deadline, which I've been accustomed to for 30 years, all of a sudden to 7/15.
Mhm.
So that was interesting. And then staffing is difficult in a normal year anyway, but let alone when you have these external factors of COVID and compliance and all of these things. It was a tough year just for planning purposes, but implementation purposes and just overall energy and emotion.
Right. And I think too, it's a scary thing right now for business owners to try to figure out, you know, can I, keep going with the staff that I have? Do I need to cut back? Do I need to add someone, because we're going into hopefully a busier season? Like just not knowing, because you can't look at trending of what had happened in the past, because this is so different. So just
Yeah.
trying to anticipate, am I going to have the cash to be able to pay the bills? Is there going to be another PPP round that's going to help us, through
Right.
this next few months? Like there's just so much that's so different than we've ever had to think about before, that it's
Yeah.
just definitely had some major impacts on businesses and the business owners, and working with those individuals as well in your businesses. So in
Yeah.
terms of COVID and the things that have happened because of the pandemic, what specific services did you offer to your customers?
Well, as a firm that primarily, we're really proactive with planning, and that's
Mhm.
just not planning with taxes and with compliance planning, but that's financial planning and planning for your business and its growth and things like that. And so as far as services, those things really haven't changed too much for us, but the client's response and their openness now to listening and the realization that they need those types of services now,
Mhm.
because some of them have had the floor ripped out from under them. Think
Right.
about the restaurants and the gyms and
Mhm.
a lot of the businesses that were deemed non-essential
Right.
had to either shutter their brick and mortar business or location, or they had to go remote. Some of them weren't prepared for remote.
Right.
Some of them weren't prepared to shutter their business and all of that. And so we spent a lot of time and I know you did too, we spent a lot of time with the PPP and
Mhm.
the EIDL, which are the two SBA programs. And then there's been several grants that have been rolling out through either LA County, LA City. I know Torrance has had some here, our local city. And then there's been trade industries and things. And so what we have learned and seen is that all these grants, and they have exclusions for
Right.
forgiveness. And so the clients really need help in supporting their decisions. And so we started off with the PPP and helping them apply for the loans. And now we're in the whole loan forgiveness side, which I
Right.
know that we'll probably talk about in a little bit. And payroll expenses. If you use payroll expenses for one, you might not be able to use it for another, and items like that. So we've been busy. Our back office has been busy building spreadsheets and trackers for our clients. And most of these folks we work with on a monthly basis, so we're able to help them track and make sure and confirm that those expenses that they're documenting and using are correct, so that if they're ever audited or looked at, some of these things you just have to hold for 5 years, 6 years. Some of them you might have to turn in. So, but beyond that, profit diagnostic reviews have been really big. So as you can imagine, for businesses, even if you didn't have to shutter or disperse your business, you probably didn't meet your growth plans this year.
Right.
Chances are, it's safe to say. And so there are about 9 different indicators for profit and for growth. And so we actually have a process that we take our clients through. And we model these changes. We ask them what's important to them and what they would like to accomplish. And if they could solve 3 things in their business, what would those be and how would they, from their perspective? And then we start to model that with our software and show them that, maybe they don't need to make these big improvements. It's the little things that might change the bottom line.
Right.
So, and then we always have the financial planning.
Of course. And I think that's one thing I've loved about, having met you and learned about your business over time is you do kind of marry the CPA tax side of things with the financial planning. So you really can look at things kind of in a holistic approach, instead of this is just going to save you money on tax, or this is what you want to do, for saving for your future, but not paying attention to the tax impact. So I know that's been something I think that's really useful. So I'm glad to have you as a resource, for that too.
We're glad to work with you.
Yeah, but it is so true that there's so much that has to be planned. That's what we're also trying to start working with clients more on, that looking into things as they're happening too, instead of someone coming to us later after, they've done their bookkeeping, because we do try to work with people on a monthly basis too, but some just bring it when it's, time to go see the CPA and they need their bookkeeping done. But we're trying to actually say too, let's have that live data where we can really look at what's happening. Where can some changes be made? How can we help you be more profitable? Where are there opportunities for growth? And I think that's important to really be paying attention to now, and not just, be concerned about kind of what is the pandemic going to have on the impact just in the short term, but really start looking at long-term things as well. And I think that's really important for people to realize, like, talk to a professional, whether it's, your current CPA, a financial planner, even someone like us who does the bookkeeping. We're not CPAs, but talking with someone who could really help you understand what your numbers mean and what you can do to, make some changes, I think is important.
Sure. And to your point, Candy, annual, we see a lot of clients that come in this time of year too with their accounting systems. And we find that if we haven't been working with them on a continuous basis, it really impedes us from getting into the planning, because we have to spend time to clean up their books so that we have a good foundation in order to move into the cash flow planning or the profit diagnostic planning. And the other thing I just wanted to mention too is that, we experienced the last big, the Great Recession. The last big item that we experienced here with our economy was 07, 08. And there were many small businesses, many medium-sized businesses that just shot the lights out. Business owners, the smaller business owners, are able to adjust pretty much to the economic factors that happen to them, whether it's expansion or reduction. Small business owners are really good at reducing expenses. This situation is a little different because you have compliance and ordinances that are telling you that you got to close down. And so it's just like, that's a little different. But the importance of planning in this environment is going to help one recover, or maybe even reposition. There's a book out there, Who Moved My Cheese? And so maybe the cheese, as a result of this, maybe there's been a paradigm shift in their profession or industry, and maybe there is a way now to deliver services digitally, or some other, they can pivot and come out of this much stronger. It's like some of the restaurants, they're offering prepackaged ingredients for their dinners, and then their chef has created a YouTube video And when you
Right.
buy it, you get a code to go up and you can prepare it in your own home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things like that.
Right. And sometimes it just takes someone outside of the day-to-day to see some of those other options too. So I think sometimes if you're just in the midst of it and you're trying to figure out what happens, you might be too close to it. So sometimes just having another person come in and sit down and look at it might prompt some creativity, or like, oh, I hadn't thought of that, so I think it is good in that way too.
Well, we find that, I mean, I find that in my own business. I'm sure you do too. I know that we have both worked with coaches and mastermind groups and things like that for our own relative businesses and our own personal growth. And that's important for business owners to understand and to embrace. That's okay, because to your point is that somebody outside not only might see things differently, they can kind of see the forest through the trees, if you will, but they can also offer accountability. And that's what we find that is really useful. And that's what our clients would say is useful, is that we're very proactive. And we hold our clients, if they tell us they're going to do something, we hold them to that, gently, lovingly, but we hold them to that. And, it helps push everybody forward.
Right. That's so true. Well, you were mentioning earlier too about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and originally we were helping people apply, and now we're kind of in that forgiveness process. Some of the bank portals haven't opened yet, at least from my experience. Some of my clients' bank portals aren't yet open, but some have. So have you started helping your clients with that PPP forgiveness? Can you discuss, for those who maybe aren't sure what the process is, what that looks like for them, if they're going to try to do it on their own, just touching base on that.
Sure. So that's really a loaded question. The goal, as I said earlier, the goalposts keep moving, and they're even right now working on, I think it's a 4th application now that's supposed to simplify loans for under, maybe it's 100,000. I don't know. As I said, the goalposts keep moving. So what we're finding is that the lenders or the third-party representatives for the lenders or the banks, there's many different types that have loaned the PPPs. I mean, look, Intuit got into the action, for QuickBooks users to issue a PPP, and they're not a bank. But nevertheless, we find that they're starting with the larger loans, and so our clients that have had the larger PPP loans are the ones where the portals open. So those with like First Foundation Bank, Lendio. In fact, as soon as I finished this morning, we've got a PPP loan forgiveness that we're going to do a Zoom call with to support the client in getting through that process and signing off. And what we're seeing is, and this is what makes it difficult and very difficult for the business owners out there, is that every lender can structure their own requirements of what they need to see different than what the SBA needs. And so you can grab the SBA checklist, and a lot of the lenders have sent those out, but it really is their own process. So we've been through a couple of these, and I got to tell you, they're all different. We think, we get everything ready in a folder to upload and preload, like payroll journals and tax returns and bank statements, and all of a sudden we get a curveball that they need the lenders requesting something else. Thankfully, with all the portals we've been on, you can save your work, come back to it later. So it's not like you have to go through the scary process each time. But what we're seeing too is just a lot of confusion out there, and a lot of confusion. I had a client come back to us and say, I had the conversation, and we'll talk about this in a minute, about the taxability of the PPP, the loan forgiveness, and how that is working. As we know it today, could change, but as we know it today. And the client came back and said, well, my banker said it's not taxable. So, we've got an issue. So, it's things like that. There's just a lot of misinformation out there. So I would encourage those that have taken the PPP to, if you're working with a professional, consult with them. They're keeping their ear to the ground. We don't always know the answers. I know in our office, I've established relationships with the SBA, so I have a number I can call somebody I can email, but also with a couple of the lenders I've got in to try to learn what the process was. And they're learning that we're trying to help them and make their process more efficient. And so they're willing to share information with us.
Right.
And so that's kind of cool. What we're finding issues, and Candy, you can let me know what you guys are seeing too, is when we applied for the loans, it was under one set of rules, right? With the full-time equivalents. We didn't really know how business owners were going to be treated. They didn't have all that defined. Business owner benefits, how things were going to be limited in compensation. And so we're seeing just a lot of people kind of overshot that when it came to paying the owners this year. Some folks thought they could pay the owners more of the PPP, and then they had to go from the 8-week to the 24-week period so that they could extend their loan forgiveness using their rank and file folks.
Right.
So I don't know, what are some of the things you've seen?
Yeah, well, I definitely think there was a lot of confusion around even like, you know, the first time it came out, it was, like you said, it was 8 weeks and it was 75%, you know, 25%. Then it changed to, you only had to use 60%, you know, for payroll, and 40% could be the approved, you know, non-payroll. Now you had 24 weeks. And, you know, there's just been a lot of confusion with clients wondering, should I use the 8 weeks or the 24 weeks? And then even with the portals, like I said, we've had a few that the portals have opened. And we have seen, as you were saying too, that they're asking for different information and things to be submitted in a different way. But one of the portals that I found a little bit frustrating myself was you had to either upload everything at once in one folder, or you couldn't upload anything. Where, you know, like if you normally are uploading, you know, things at one time and then you need to add something later, you can go back in. This one wasn't allowing it. So when I originally was submitting the information, it was before the third quarter payroll reports were done. So we'd submitted all the information. We were just waiting. And they had a folder that would say, you know, like rent. And if you didn't have rent, you couldn't like actually complete the application because you had to have something in there, but you couldn't delete the folder either. It was really interesting. I had to actually email them and say, well, we don't need this one, and we want to submit. But then after I'd submitted information and we were waiting for them to like clear out folders we didn't need, then they said, well, we want the third quarter payroll report. Well, I'd already uploaded everything to that payroll folder and you couldn't add anything else. Once you added once, that was it. And so I had to put it in like a miscellaneous folder. So it was just little things like that that have made it a little bit complicated in trying to get all the information they need. But I think overall, we're able to pull everything that they need and submit it. So it's not so confusing for the client to like, what payroll journal do I need? Or, you know, I'm not sure what the start date is and the end date is. Like we can figure all of that out for them. But it's definitely been interesting. And again, we're still waiting for some of them to open. And I think, like I said, that's part of, now we have 3 applications where when it first started, it was going to be one forgiveness application. And then they had added, you know, there's an easy, and now we have the 3508S. And like you said, maybe there's going to be another one. So it's, as you're saying, even going into the forgiveness process now, like, is it going to change? And as you talked about taxability, which I would love to get into that right now, explaining what happens. But so your client, his banker said, oh no, it's not taxable. Well, if you're looking at the money coming in, of course, it wasn't income. So that's not taxable per se, you know, on the income side. But let's talk about why it could be taxable to them, because we know that the IRS has stated at this point, you know, their position, and unless Congress changes anything, that position won't change. So can you explain what that position is and why some of this could be taxable to them?
Yeah, sure. So the IRS came down, I believe it was the end of May, possibly June, and they seized this right away with a ruling basically that said, you know, this is like cancellation of debt. So I don't want to get too technical, but when a credit card or when a loan is forgiven, there typically is what we call COD income, cancellation of debt income, that has to be recognized. And there's ways to not have that taxed to you if you're insolvent, and there's all these rules, which isn't for today. But they came out and took that stance. To roll it back a little bit, it clearly wasn't the intent of Congress when they did this, the CARES Act. It wasn't the intent to cause a back-end tax issue.
Right.
But this was done so quickly. And let's face it, our congressional lawmakers, the people, are not, they're not necessarily tax savvy, and they don't think about, it's like a stack of dominoes. They don't think
Right.
about, well, this decision, you set it off and what happens all the way down. And so now we're stuck with, and then we were in a crazy environment, right?
Right.
Politically. And so it's like this has been held as hostage as we go. So moving forward, what happens is that in November, the IRS came out and they gave some examples, and they, made the ruling a little softer, a little more easy for people to understand, but it still comes down to the same thing, is that once the loan is forgiven, so the loan was used for certain expenses, rent, payroll expenses, retirement, healthcare, utilities, things like that. So whatever was paid with those PPP funds, it was paid with a loan. So when the loan is forgiven, those expenses are not deductible on your return for tax purposes. The income wasn't taxable, and so the deductions are not deductible. It's a net zero sum game, right? And that is what it says. So what business owners are having an issue with now is that they had to expend those loan amounts for those expenses that I named earlier. And they had to expend it all in order to get full loan forgiveness. So now when we remove that, say, $100,000 of expenses that they paid with the PPP from their bottom line, all of a sudden they get income. It adds back 100,000, right? So if you're a C corporation at 21%, I've had the pleasure of delivering this news over the last couple of weeks to business owners, and we've been talking about it, but they forget until now that, hey, you're going to owe, on the federal side, $21,000 on this.
Right.
And it's causing a lot of grief and a lot of strife, particularly at the second shutdown, when it seems to be a wider net and businesses are affected even more.
Right.
So,
and the other issue really that I see is, forgiveness. You don't even have to apply right away. You've got 10 months from the time your, 24-week period ends to even apply. Then your bank has, 60 days to really review everything before it submits it to the SBA, and the SBA has 90 days, right?
90
so we're
days,
looking at potentially 15 months from the time your period ends to know if you're getting forgiveness and if that full amount is being forgiven, or, of course, if you had an idle loan, or maybe they didn't, meet the requirements depending on their loan amount, and there's some amount that's not forgiven, that goes into this whole concept as well.
Right.
But, if someone is supposed to be filing a tax return in March or April, or if, even with an extension, September or October, what if they don't know, right, if it's forgiven or not? So are you going to file your tax return assuming everything's forgiven and you can't expense it and you owe tax on it? Or are you going to just do it hoping Congress changes the law and then it's forgiven? And then if it's not, you amend? Like, that throws into a whole nother, kind of just confusion around this whole PPP.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's great insight. So what the IRS came down and opined in November, right before Thanksgiving, they said, look, if a business reasonably believes that they're going to go for loan forgiveness, request it and receive it, then even though they haven't received it, those expenses are not deductible in 2020, right? And in the case where it's expected that it will happen and it won't, and this is to your point, and it doesn't, then those expenses can be deducted. So if we go 15 months out, we are past the extension. The extension would take us, if you're due 3/15, would take us to 9/15, so September 15th. So if you do the math, we're still even beyond that. And as the process gets clogged with more and more loans that are going through this process, it's very possible it might get extended out even longer. And so what we are recommending now is that if you haven't received your loan forgiveness by March 15th, that we put you on extension. We plan for the worst. So we make sure that there are funds allocated, because we don't even know whether there's going to be penalties on this amount.
Right.
if a business has to recognize this income. So questions that your audience might be kind of contemplating right now, it's a question that a client just recently brought up, and they're like, well, if I'm at $100,000 loss and my loan is going to be forgiven, we think it's reasonable, and so that's 100,000, and so I still have to pay taxes on the 100,000.
Right.
Well, the answer is no, because their business is already at a loss of 100,000. So you add that 100,000 back in, and they're at zero profitability in my example. So those taxes would not be due. It depends on what your taxable income is. It's not that there's a certain tax on that forgiven loan amount or those expenses that can't be deducted.
Right.
Just wanted to clear that up. Extensions is what we're doing, and then we're just hoping that we get some sort of additional clarity. Whenever there's a tax law change, you never know. You try to follow the regulations and you try to follow what's there, but it takes like 5 or 6 years to figure out when there are tax cases and court cases and litigation. That's when the regulations are firmed up and published. And so the answer is that we're not going to know.
Right.
And we can file amended returns for 3 years.
Right, exactly. And that's probably what's going to happen. Because like you said, I think there is going to be backlog. I think so many people will be applying at one time that at first banks may not have enough people to even go through everything to finish it in 60 days. And then when it goes to the SBA and you have everyone in the United States, who's submitting, these requests, I think it's going to take longer than 90 days for them too. We'll see, it will be interesting to see what happens, but I'm definitely thinking we're going to have to plan that it will take even longer than they're estimating. So yeah, that will be interesting.
It is interesting. And we've had clients in our conversations, in our year-end planning conversations, say, well, I don't want to not take the deduction for that because we don't know what's going to happen. And it's like, well, then be prepared for the amendment and be prepared for the extra costs of that and possible penalties and things like that to be had, because we just don't know at this point. So kind of interesting environment that we're in. And then to your point with the SBA being so far behind, and maybe you have some clients that are in this boat. We have clients that applied for the EIDL loan back in August. They've not received anything. They've been approved. Nothing, not even the emergency $1,000 funding per employee.
Wow.
Which has brought up some interesting things, because on the PPP loan forgiveness, if you have an EIDL number, they want it.
Right.
And that's this case that we're going to be, all right, after this session that we're going to be working on today. And so what we've been advised by that lender is that if they haven't received anything, any funding, even the emergency side, don't put it on the application. And, I don't want the client to perjure themselves or anything. Right. So I need to check to make sure. So those are some of the crazy things that we're dealing with on our side.
Right. And I think we should just make really clear on that too. If you did get that EIDL advance, so that 1,000 per employee, up to that 10,000 max that they were going to offer, that is at this point, unless anything changes, not forgivable as well. So if someone had a $50,000 loan, they got the $10,000 advance, they're only going to have a $40,000 forgivable maximum. So they will still have 10% or 10,000. That they would have to, pay back.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. No, fantastic point. And that's something that people are forgetting as well.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure we touch on that too, because again, it's confusing for people to know I had this, loan or that loan. And, it said that the advance, didn't have to be paid back. Well, yes, the EIDL advance doesn't have to be paid back. But if you got the PPP as well, they are saying, you can't kind of get the benefit of both. Right.
Right. So yeah, no double dipping.
Right. Exactly. So I'd love to come back to the topic where you're talking about, planning and looking at the data and, what you're doing with your clients. So can you just, talk about that, looking at profit, looking at your financial planning and, figuring out what you'll be doing for tax purposes and, kind of helping the listener know what they should be doing.
Sure, sure. So when we work with our clients, we go beyond the numbers. We go beyond what the accounting data or the tax data. I mean, that's all important, right? Because it's all part of one's wealth position. And if you're a business owner, I would venture to say that in our experience, the fair amount, aside from owning a home in Southern California, right, the fair amount of your wealth is tied up in your business. Okay, so I've always mentioned, and this just stems from growing up in the family businesses, what do you want out of your business? Why did you start it? What value does your business offer to your customers, to your clients, to your colleagues? And is that value, can it be improved on? And if so, how? Where do you want your business to be in 5 years? We talk about planning. And so we do multiple year tax planning, but we also want to see where our clients are. And so we try to break their goals down into short term, medium term, and long term. And then from there, we break it down into years, and then quarters, and then months,
right.
So that we can help them to develop a process to back into what their quarterly goals are, but they have little tasks that they need to accomplish monthly. Business owners have, and it's not a fault, but it can be a huge issue. And Candy, I'm the same way. I would imagine you are too, is that we as business owners tend to chase shiny objects. And so, and what I mean by that is
right.
Not necessarily the latest and greatest, but it's like, oh, okay, wow, profitability sounds really good. Oh, okay, no, I've got to do my retirement planning. And so we're busy moving all around. We're busy building our business and in the operations side, but we're not able to get through with the planning. And so again, that's a little bit of accountability with our clients. We ask them questions like, what are your three biggest challenges? And that's been one of my kind of conversational pieces that I do even with colleagues is, what are you guys experiencing this year? What are you feeling? What, if you could change one thing, what would that be? Going into 2021, how are you planning? What are you doing in your own business?
Right.
And then it's always important to ask the why. And so why is it important to overcome those challenges? What does that mean? And then once we get those things documented and understood, and one of the things is that I want to be able to get on the same side as my client, and the same side of the table, and kind of get into their head and make sure that I understand where they are and where they want to go, because then I can use that with their numbers, providing they have decent numbers and a good foundation to help them and to provide recommendations and education, and to together discover how they can enhance their wealth position, their business profitability, their cash flow, and overall planning.
Right. And I think even having them realize, like, you need to look at what you want to do towards retirement, like if you want to sell your business, if you want to have, someone else take over, but really having that plan, because I think a lot of people will think, well, at some point, I'm going to work until I retire, and I'm going to sell my business, and I'm going to have the value, from the business to help me, live through retirement. And, that's great if everything works out well, but let's look at the situation now where someone was planning to retire in the next couple of years. And if their business has had a serious hit right now, if they didn't do anything else to plan for their retirement and put funds away any other way, this didn't work out very well, and so having a conversation where you can talk with them about that too, like what should you be doing to plan for your future, and not just put everything in the basket of, I'm going to sell my business.
Yeah. And to your point, that is something that we commonly see, right? Is that business owners are like, well, we're going to package this baby up and we're going to sell it. And so, we'll work with them on their exit strategy, but in a year like this, so we just, not that the client is looking to retire or anything, but think about the devastation to certain industries and professions that have occurred as of this. And so I just worked on this week, is that we had a client that's in the personal care, the workout business, and
Mm-hmm.
was looking to sell a location in prior years, but didn't throw the trigger for several reasons, and that's all cool. But now that the business has been shuttered or
Mm-hmm.
reopened and then shuttered again, the exponential loss
Right.
has been, they can't even collect the franchise fee
Mm-hmm.
as a sale price now.
Right.
And so now it's a matter of, well, this is causing us a lot of stress, and so we just want to give it away. And it's like, wow, when we're looking at the numbers, how can this be?
Right.
And unfortunately, to your point earlier, we can't even look at 2021 to say, well, if we can make it to here, then everything is good, because we just don't know.
Right. Exactly.
You know, so yeah, to your point, and that's where we always come back, and that's where I say that now clients are a bit more responsive to planning and to looking at their goals and objectives, and to have continual meetings to make sure that they're moving forward towards those. Because when you come into an environment like this, and planning isn't the whole answer, but let's say that prior to this, you had done great holistic planning, you had your retirement being well funded, you had savings for emergencies being well funded, you had your business humming along, you knew what your profitability and your those diagnostics were, and how to tweak certain things and make small improvements. No guarantee in this situation, but I believe that the clients that we see that are doing the best and adapting the best have implemented this type of planning many years ago.
Right.
Than coming in and trying to grab it now, kind of holding on to straws. But the awareness for most people, until you have an event, like think about a health event, you know, you might not change your diet or might not exercise until you have that health event. Same thing, this has been a shock. And so it's caused people to want to plan, to look at their situation, to look at their estate plans, to really look at this, because there have been people dying from this, right? I mean, to get to the grim.
Right. And that's the thing. We are talking about things that, you know, are a little bit heavy too, but on the positive side, like I said, if we can, you know, sit down and really help create a plan of action and, you know, help make some changes that are going to bring about better profitability or, you know, more growth, you know, that's the positive side of all of this too. And understanding there is going to be a cost, you know, of paying for those extra services, but then you should see a return on your investment. So it's important to know that.
Exactly. Oh, absolutely. And, you know, there were great things that came out of the 07, 08, not to say that this is the same magnitude. That with businesses, and, you know, adversity brings growth if you look at it and you take those proper actions. And we're in that period.
Right. Well, I know we've been talking on a lot of different things. There's so much more we probably could even touch on, but we, you know, just really wanted to have this discussion and really just kind of basically start talking about the topics. But I'm sure, you know, you have an offer that you would like to offer to the listeners in case they have more information they need or have questions of you. So can you share what that might be with our listeners?
Sure, absolutely. For anybody that's on this call or listens to the recording later, I'm available, making myself available for a half hour, no cost consultation. That's with me personally, by Zoom or by phone. Would you like me to give the contact information?
Yes, that'd be great. How can they reach you? Phone number, website, any of that?
Yeah, so you can pick up the phone, call 310-792-9999, or you can reach us through email, and you could reach me at Cherie at cputmancpa.com or Cherie at putmanfinancialgroup.com.
And do you want to spell that for them too, just to make sure they spell it correctly?
Sure. So Cherie is Cherie, and the last name is Putman, Putm as in man, A-N. Thank you, Candy.
No problem. And do you have any like social media sites you want to share also, or LinkedIn, anything like that where they could find you as well?
Yeah, we're up on all the majors. So if you go up on our website, we have links. So you can find us at putmanfinancialgroup.com. And we are on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn. And at the first of the year, we have our new website coming up online.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. I really appreciate it. I know, like I said, this is a topic that there's so much information. It can be confusing, but I wanted to just, start that discussion. And like I said, if people wanted to reach out, they could, but thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me back on the show. And it was just a blast to be able to sit here and just discuss this past year and services and things that you're doing with your clients as well. So it was a fun time.
Thank you. And I also just want to thank those who are tuning in to listen to us today. I hope you found this topic helpful and then answers just some of the questions about the challenges of COVID as we head into 2021. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to Cherie at any of the links that she shared, or you can send us a message at media@abandp.com. And would you please share the show information with those you know? I'd greatly appreciate your support. Next week's topic is virtual selling in the digital era. I hope you can join us for this presentation. And please remember, you can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and my website is abandp.com. You could also find the podcast posted on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Until next time, have a great week.
Thank you for listening to This Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next Tuesday. Have a terrific week.